So good day everyone. I am Rayla Magtana Banugan. So today, I will be continue the discussion last meeting. Since we are done discussing the Renaissance period and the Baroque period, so now let us proceed to the next one, which is my report, the neoclassical era or the neoclassical period of the year 1750 to 1850. So first, let us define what is neoclassical period. So the term neoclassical, the prefix neo originates from the Greek roots neos. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary online, it translates to young, fresh, new. And the word classics also translates from the Latin word classicus, which denotes the highest rank or highest class. So the term classical also refers to the classical era when Greek and Roman ideals thrive and inform a way of life and culture. So sorry guys, I did not include this in my PowerPoint, but kindly take note na lang. So that is why ginatawag na siya as neoclassical period. It is because from the word neo, refer na siya or naga-refer na siya sa new or bag-o lang siya. So remember what unsa nata ka nga year karon, so bag-o lang gid ng neoclassical period, so the year 1750 to 1850. So the classical period started in Europe around the middle of the 17th to 18th century and continued during the 19th century. So although nag ano ni neoclassical period sa 17th to 18th century or ana nga year, pero naka-continue gihapon siya until 19th century. And it initially had roots in Rome but spread to many other countries, primarily France and Britain, but also Russia and Germany and among others. So particularly in Europe gid siya naga-start. So, nganong kinatawag man na siya as neoclassical period? So, it is called as neoclassical period because the writers look back to the ideals of art, forms of classical times. So, now let us proceed to the next slide. So, in this era, there was a return to the classical ideals and art produced inspired patriotism and nationalism. So, ani nga era return gihapon na siya or naga-produce or naga-inspired gihapon siya as patriotism and nationalism. So when we speak patriotism and nationalism, so what is that? So patriotism, the quality of being patriotic, devotion to and vigorous support for one's country, or it is also a feeling of love, devotion, and sense of attachment to one's country. So say for example, diri asa to as Philippines. So ang mahatag dako ng example is si Jose Rizal. So gipakita gid niya ang iyahang love sa ato ang country, which is matawag siya as usa ka kanang makabayan kay gipaglaban niya ang iyahang country for his love. So nationalism, so from the word national, so nations, identification with one's own nation and support for its interest, especially to the inclusion of detriment of the interest of other nations. So while nationalism emphasizes a unity of cultural past with inclusion of the language and heritage, patriotism is based on love towards people with a greater emphasis on values and beliefs. So next, among the historical events of the period were the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte as French emperor from 1804 to 1814. So, who was Napoleon Bonaparte? So, he was a French military general, the first emperor of France, and one of the world's greatest military leaders. So, sana siya ka French military general si Bonaparte, first emperor of France and one of the greatest military leaders. So Napoleon revolutionized military organization and training, sponsored the Napoleonic Code, reorganized education, and established the long-lived Concordat and the papacy. So, Napoleon Bonaparte also was a French national and military leader. So, national military leader po na siya. He became famous and as an artillery commander during the French Revolution. So, uh, naging famous po siya sa pagiging niya artillery commander. So, during na siya sa French Revolution. So the Battle of Austerlitz, which is known for as a battle of three emperors and is considered as Napoleon's greatest victory in history. So ang sa ato nga time, ato nga year, 1804 to 1814, which is uh, na si Napoleon sa Battle of Austerlitz, which is mao na siya ang considered as Napoleon's greatest victory in the history. So a battle na siya sa three emperors, which is usa na siya ka first emperor si Bonaparte. So next is Benjamin Franklin's experiment with electricity in 1751. So, who is Benjamin Franklin? So, he was an American polymath who was active as a writer, scientist, inventor, a statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, and political philosopher. So, one of the foremost of the founding fathers, Franklin helped draft the Declaration of Independence and was one of its signers represented the United States in France during the American Revolution. So, usa na siya nga nag-sign anang Declaration of Independence sa United States, or usa na siya nga nag-represent sa United States to the France para mag-sign anang declaration sa independence. So he made important contributions to science, especially in the understanding of electricity, and is remembered for the weight, wisdom, and elegance of his writing. So siya ang naka-discovered anang electricity. So for as I know, dili lang kay ang electricity ang iyahang na-invent, which is ang na-discover, which is he discovered also invented fire companies, lightning rod, bifocals, or naa pa jud to siya pero dili na ko ma-remember. And the next one is the publication of the first edition of Encyclopedia Britannica in 1771. So kaning first edition of Encyclopedia Britannica, mao ni siya katong mga encyclopedia which is kana mga Merriam-Webster, which is nakatabang sa tuwa karon. So the first edition of Encyclopedia Britannica was published and printed in Edinburgh for the engraver Andrew Bell and the printer Colin MacFarquhar by a society of gentlemen in Scotland, and was sold by MacFarquhar at his printing office in Nicholson Street. So on December 10, 1768, the Caledonian Mercury and the Edinburgh Evening Courant carried an advertisement announcing that this day is published. So the edition's first part. So mao na siya nga kanang exact date sa December 10, 1768, which is they called as the day is published, or the edition first part. So kana nga time dili katong which is ang nakabutang manggod diri sa tuang PowerPoint is 1771. So the day nga na-publish gyud ang first edition sa Encyclopedia Britannica is the day exact day of December 10, 1768. So the work was issued in parts from December 1768 to 1771 with double column pages. So gipublished ang Encyclopedia Britannica sa year of 1768, which is nag-end ang ilahang work anang ana nga encyclopedia to the year of 1771. Next is the American Declaration of Independence in 1776. So kung remember ta, as I said a while ago nga isa nga nag-sign sa Declaration of Independence is si Benjamin Franklin. So who is so what is the Declaration of Independence in 1776? By issuing the Declaration of Independence adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4, 1776, the 13 American colonies severed their political connections to Great Britain. So the Declaration summarized the colonists' motivation of seeking independence. Isa nga nag-sign anang ilahang declaration sa independence is Franklin Benjamin. So isa na siya nga nag-sign sa ilahang sa Declaration of Independence sa American. So next, the invention of the steamboat and the beginning of French Revolution in 1788. So unsa man ang invention of the steamboat? So mao na siya ang gi-invent ni Robert Fulton. So siya ang nag-invent ng steamboat. So in 1787, John Fitz demonstrated a working model of the steamboat concept on the Delaware River. So sa ano gid na siya sa ocean or sa tubig gid na siya. So the first truly successful design appeared 2 decades later. It was built by Robert Fulton with the assistance of Robert R. Livingston, the former U.S. Minister to France. So si Robert Livingston mao na siya ang nag-assist kang Fulton nag-invent anang steamboat. So which is si Livingston isa na siya ka former U.S. Minister sa France. So Fulton then began making this round trip on the regular basis for paying customers. So Fulton did invent the first commercially successful steamboat and brought the technology of steam power to the rivers of the United States. So Fulton's steamboats helped to power the Industrial Revolution by moving goods and people throughout the United States during the 18th century. So one of the important nga nganong nag-invent si Fulton aning steamboat para makatabang sa mga tao sa United States atong time of the start na sa French Revolution kay para makatabang sa mga tao, which is to moving goods. So next is in music, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart died in 1719 and Ludwig van Beethoven composed Symphony No. 5 in 1808. So aning year of the neoclassical era. So sa music, si Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, so og si Ludwig van Beethoven. So kinsa man ni sila nga mga tao. So si Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart had a powerful influence on the works of Ludwig van Beethoven. And Beethoven held Mozart in high regard. Some of his music recalls Mozart. So, ang iyahang music, ang mga music ni Beethoven kay gina-recall na siya ni Mozart. So, he composed several variations on Mozart's themes and he modeled a number of his compositions on those of the older composer. So despite his short life, his rapid pace of composition resulted in more than 800 works of virtually every genre of his time. So remember anong 800 works of virtually every genre. So kuan gid na siya nga work. So Ludwig van Beethoven was a German composer and pianist. So composer ni siya and pianist. Beethoven remains one of the most admired composer in the history of Western music. So his works ranks amongst most performed of the classical music repertoire and span the transition from the classical period to the romantic era in classical music. So si Beethoven was a German pianist and composer widely considered as one of the greatest musical geniuses of all time. So, ang tawag po sa iya is one of the greatest musical geniuses of all time. So, his innovative compositions combine vocals and instruments. So, mauto siya ang kay Beethoven. So now let us proceed to the next slide. So, the neoclassical period was concerned about producing accurate reconstruction of Greco-Roman works of antiquity. So, ang neoclassical era or neoclassical period, concerned po na siya in producing accurate reconstruction of Greco-Roman. So, reconstruction. So, naga-reconstruct sila. So, what is Greco-Roman? So, are partly Greek and partly Roman. So, specifically having a characteristics of Roman art done under strong Greek influence. So, the next one is the neoclassical artist was bound by strict rules of art. So, why is it nga anang neoclassical period nganong ang artist gina-strict manggid nila ang rules about anang art. So say for example, if an artist painted a Roman soldiers, he was obliged to make the armor and weapons. So historically correct. So dapat kung unsa gyud ang sa mga artist, say for example kanang mag i-paint nimo si Jose Rizal, dapat kinahanglan nga kanang correct jud. So dili siya nga kanang mag-drawing ka nga kanang murag haka-haka lang nga mao ni si kuan, mao ni si kuan. So dapat correct jud ang i-paint or correct jud ang result sa iyahang trabaho, which is art reflects our history and documents the crucial component of our lives. So if you ever studied literature, you will see that writing reflects the period it was written in. So kailangan jud nga tarungon sa mga artist og buhat kung unsa ang naa sa history. So maula hang sundon, which is para sa mga new generation nga kanang maano nila kanang ma-adapt nila. Hala, mao di ay ni siya. So ingani di ay ang history about sa ani nga art. So now let us proceed to the next slide. So artists work in simple forms and colors, avoiding all unnecessary complication. Art became formally austere and rigid, rejecting the bright colors and movements of the previous Rococo and Baroque styles. So mao ni siya ang ako ang example or mao ni siya ang image aning Baroque and Rococo styles. Ang Rococo style, it is characterized by lightness, elegance, and an exuberant use of curving natural forms in ornamentation. So the word Rococo is derived from the French word rocaille. Unsa pagka-pronounce ani oy. Rocaille or unsa ba ni rocaille, which denoted the shell-covered rock work that was used to decorate artificial grottos. So ang Rococo style, so kung makita nato diri sa picture, so kuan gyud siya kanang naa gyud siya lightness and elegance. So makita man gyud nato dira so Rococo painting which originated in early 18th century in Paris. So sa Paris gyud na siya originate. So the next is the Baroque style. So Baroque emphasizes dramatic, exaggerated motion and clear, easily interpreted detail. So na-discuss naman nato ni last meeting ang Baroque style. So unsa man gyud ning what are What are the difference between Baroque and Rococo art? So Baroque describes the grand, overstated, dynamic, late European art between 1650 and 17th century, while Rococo is late Baroque response that embodied light, playfulness, and more intimacy. So let us now proceed to the next, which is the royal court was the primary patron of the arts, so the common subject matter were nationalism and patriotism. So makita nato dira sa image, which is ang royal court mao na siya ang primary patron, which is it reflects, or it refers to have a patriotism and having a nationalism. So now let us proceed to the next slide. Perfection of forms and this design in neoclassical painting. So Benjamin West in 1738 to 1820 painted historical subjects which were commissioned to him. One of his great works is the death of the General Wolfe. The general died during the French of the Indian War. So mao na siya ang si Benjamin West um, was a British-American artist who painted famous historical scenes such as the death of Nelson, or the death of General Wolfe, the Treaty of Paris, and Benjamin Franklin during electricity from the sky. So, siya ang naga-discover anang electricity. So, is the death of General Wolfe, mao na siya ang great works of Benjamin West. So, makita nato dira sa image ang sa general death of General Wolfe nga namatay ang ilahang general, which is during na siya sa French and Indian War. So let us proceed to the next one. So another example of neoclassical painting is Jacques Louis David on the year 1748 to 1825. So the Oath of Horace, painted in 1784, which 4 years before the French Revolution. So gi-paint ng Oath of Horace 4 years before the French Revolution. It has for its subject matter a Roman father pledging his 3 sons to fight against the enemies of Rome. So kung makita nato dira sa image sa Oath of Horace, the year 1874, so naki-fight siya 3 sons. So mauna siya ang works of David. So next, or the last one, is the Jean Auguste Dominique Ingres on the year 1780 to 1867 painted portraits of the great men. So in Napoleon Bonaparte, on his imperial throne, he depicted the conqueror in the sculpture-like pose, clothed in a grand robe, seated on his grand throne. Its grand representation makes the viewer cover its submission to the powerful figure. The overly adorned figure of the seated emperor is the symbol of his power and glory. So makita nato dira sa image sa on his imperial throne. So naglingkod yun na siya si Napoleon Bonaparte. So sa ako ang na-mention a while ago nga kanang si Napoleon Bonaparte was a first French emperor. So sa that time nga kanang usa na siya kanang nakalingkod na siya. So sa time man na siya nga 1804, so 1814, so mao ni siya ang ginatawag na kanang Reynal Napoleon. So that is why nga kanang nakaano na siya, kanang nakalingkod na siya is diha sa iyahang throne or sa iyahang trono. Kanang katong na siya, katong nakahuman na siya sa iyahang Battle of Austerlitz. So pagkahuman ato, so ginatawag siya as Reynal Napoleon. So that is why nga naa na siya sa ana nga throne. So kanang nag-symbolize na siya sa iyahang victory. So I think that's all my report, and thank you for listening, and that would be all. Thank you.